Welcome to the MHP Exchange, where the riches are in the niches. We'll show you how to invest your way into mobile home parks with real strategies, tips, and behind-the-scenes know-how to grow your cash flow. Stick around. This is where smart investing begins.
And welcome back to another episode of the MHP Exchange. If you're here because you want to hear from operators, you want to hear from industry makers and people who are actually in the field working, giving you their tips, insight, and working knowledge on how to create a pathway to your financial freedom. I'm Frank Rizzo, and today we have two guests who are really killing it, and they've created a blueprint for people who are looking to get involved in the real estate business. They're entrepreneurs and they're real estate investors, and they're also real estate brokers, which we won't hold against them. And they're also the host of the Commercial Real Estate Blueprint podcast. I have Jesse Durham, Graham Storey. How are you doing today, guys?
We're doing phenomenal, man. I really appreciate you taking the time. We just had you on the podcast, so it feels like we're doing part two. I'm excited to jump in and brings the value to the audience.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having us.
Well, thanks for being on. And before we get started, why don't you give everybody a little brief introduction of who you are and how you got to where you are today in real estate? And I'll start with Jesse just because of how you appear on my screen, and then we'll pivot over to Graham.
Okay. So my journey is kind of through Graham, actually. So it'll be an interesting way to go about it. So I remember, meeting Graham at App State, and we clearly had like an entrepreneurial, need and want and drive and stuff like that. So we kind of really connected, hit it off, kept up with him through the content, social media, and just kept bugging Graham. I was like, I want to get into real estate. I want to buy something. And he's like, well, dude, we should like buy an Airbnb in Durham. So we jumped into that. And as I was transitioning out of the military, I decided I wanted to get into commercial real estate full time. I was talking to Graham about all the things that him and the people at his firm were doing. It was like, that could be a really great bridge, because I also have a glove company. I wanted to be able to kind of do both, and entrepreneurship and commercial real estate kind of gives you that time where you can really focus on what you want to focus on. It doesn't have to be at the office 100 times, have to be at the office every day kind of thing. But so that's kind of how I got in. I wanted to be a broker and figured out brokerage was the best way to jump into investing as well, because you saw people investing transaction after transaction, and just jumped into the internship last year and been in brokerage for about a year. Started this podcast, wanted to document the journey, talk to people who are in commercial real estate day in and day out, and just learn from people, man. And it's been an amazing journey. We started a podcast, hadn't even bought a deal yet, and I've now bought 6 buildings now and under contract on our 7th. So it's been a fast and amazing journey. It's not an overnight thing. It's literally took me about 9 months to get my first deal closed. And Graham helped me along the way. And that's how we got to today.
And you skipped over something, like you briefly mentioned it, but you didn't really elaborate on it. When you said, yes, and by the way, thank you for your military service, right? Number one. But number two, you said, well, I have a glove company, right? But it's not a little bit of a glove company. You want to share a little bit about that, because, I do think you have a little bandwidth with that, right?
Yeah. So coming out of college, I wanted to create a business where I could quickly scale and get to financial freedom. I thought I was going to do it in a year or two. Didn't happen that way, but it's essentially a steel toe boot for your hand glove. And I happened to get it into Tractor Supply online only. I know a lot of people go into the stores and they're like, where's it at? But so I'm on Amazon and I'm selling to big distribution companies now. We're working with Fastenal, and I'm working with a bunch of other like publicly traded companies, like aerospace companies and stuff like that. So it's been a 5-year journey that in the last year has just like really started to scale up, and I'm blessed to be a part of that. But it just started with an idea, and I took action, and I think, to kind of like for someone to listen to my story, whatever your idea is, take action. If it's, buying mobile home parks, just take action, get started somehow, man. It's not going to happen in a year. I had to take a year off of it for the military, but I just jumped in and didn't quit, essentially, as a story.
Just a little glove thing.
Just
Graham, Graham, and you seemed, what was your story like, and how did you and Jesse kind of connect?
Yeah. So we both went to Appalachian State, which is in Western North Carolina. Awesome school. I'm thankful for where I'm at now because it was definitely not my plan. I think it was definitely God's plan. I was in college, didn't really have any idea what I wanted to do. Before college, like in my senior year, everyone was like, oh yeah, I applied for this school, that school, this school. And I'm like, I haven't even applied for anywhere. I probably should do that. And I was snowboarding a lot at the time. I absolutely love snowboarding. And I was like, well, I've been going up to Boone a lot. Is there a college there? And I was like, there's App State. So I applied to App State, got accepted there, didn't even tour it or anything, just went there because I knew I loved snowboarding. And so, I kind of just during class and stuff, I was an okay student. Most of the time I was out at the river or snowboarding or doing something like that. And then towards my senior year, I was like, well, I need to figure out what I want to do. I thought maybe I'll open like a outdoor adventure shop or something like that, because I always thought that was really cool and sell snowboards and camping gear and stuff like that. But my dad connected me to a guy. I mentioned offhand one time to my dad, I was like, man, maybe it'd be cool to sell like lake houses or beach houses or something. Like that would be kind of fun. And he's like, well, there's a guy at our church who he sells lake houses and he went to Appalachian State. He's like, you should get lunch with him. I was like, I'll do that. So I went and got lunch with him. Long story short, he offered me an internship with his residential firm, went to work for him the summer before I graduated college, went back to school, graduated App State. And as I was moving back home to Durham, I thought I was going to be going into residential real estate. And they called me and were like, hey, we're starting a commercial division. Would you want to do that? And I was like, I know nothing about it, literally nothing. And the two guys who were in the company were very successful residential brokers. And I was like, what would you do? Would you go into commercial knowing what you know now, or would you stick in residential since you guys have been so successful at it? Both of them were like, hands down, we go into commercial real estate. And so I'm so thankful they told me that. Love those guys. And I did it. And now that I did it, looking back, I'm so glad I'm not in residential real estate. No offense to anybody who does residential brokerage. It's a great thing. So anyways, I was with them for 4.5 years, learned a ton about commercial brokerage. Oh, those guys so much. They were amazing. Got the opportunity to work for the firm I'm at now, which is basically like a small, like kind of like what you guys do. They have about $350 million of assets under management. I've been with them for 2.5 years. And the main reason I switched is because I was like, I want to know how to own commercial real estate. At the time I don't think I actually had any investments at that time, but I bought a house and a couple duplexes in the first year of being at that firm. And then I realized, you know what? I'm selling commercial real estate. I want to get into commercial real estate. So let me switch over and do that. And then Jesse joined me. He's been a massive help. He's got the same amount of drive. So we match each other's energy and we've been able to do a lot and we're super thankful. So we were like, if we're going to start buying commercial, let's document it. Cause you see everyone talking about content stuff. I grew up making videos and stuff. So I already really enjoyed that side of it. So I was like, let's do that and document it by doing a podcast, because podcasting seems to be one of the highest leveraged ways to do it. You can sit down for an hour and film a whole episode and you get a bunch of stuff out of it. And you get to talk to awesome people like you. We had you on our show, and other people, and get advice from people who are way ahead of us. So I think almost all of our success has been from other people giving us great advice and then us just taking action on it.
Well, what's amazing, and the advice that you took to go into commercial when you first start in the real estate brokerage world, and I come from the real estate brokerage world, 97% of your agents go into residential because there's velocity there. And while it might not be profitable, there's activity, and a lot of people equate the busy work with profitable work, and it's not necessarily true. And in commercial, and I'm sure you can attest to it, the transactional volume is less, right? I'm not talking dollar-wise. I'm talking transactional numbers is less. The qualified buyer pool is less, but the rewards can be greater. So there could be periods where you feel like there's sustained periods of inactivity, even though you are working, right? You're massaging relationships, you're doing a deep dive on research, and you're trying to make numbers and figures work. However, in the residential world, there's this just whirlwind of activity, and people go there because they think that's where they're going to make money. And the fact that you were able to look at that, said, all right, let me go to somebody who maybe has some information that I could use, and then act on that. I mean, that is huge and pivotal. And I think that's something that it's a skill that people have to learn, right? And I know sometimes I've been blockheaded, but the fact that you were able to do that at that point is real critical.
Yeah. And I'll elaborate on that a little more too. Like I said, it was kind of like the college thing, like almost I was just kind of naive, like kind of just fell into it. I'm super fortunate because I was like, I can get in here and I can, bust my butt, and I'll make money quicker than anybody's saying I'm going to make money. I'm going to go hard and I'm going to work my butt off. But like you said, that's just not the reality in commercial real estate. Even if you're an amazing broker and you bust your butt and you do all these things, there's still a learning curve. You have to learn, one, all the industry terms and stuff. You have to build contacts and then have them trust you. And then you have to actually get a deal under contract. And that right there, one commercial deal could take 4, 5, 6 months. So, it was, the first 2 years were brutal. The first year I made like no money at all. The second year I made a little bit of money, thankfully, enough to live off of. But I was living at home with my parents after graduating. I was engaged to my now wife, and we got married in that time and lived with my parents for 6 months. So I was like, it's not like it was just, oh, boom, successful. No, it took a lot of time. It took 2 years of me busting my butt, being extremely stressed out. But I tell people, if you can get into it and you have some kind of side hustle or something that you can do to support yourself in the meantime, and you're willing to be patient and persistent for 2 years, then once you get past that hump, you can start, having consistent clients and consistent income. And then like, it's a business like no other. I think it's the best business in the world.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, because I've seen people come in and it's not a get rich quick or make cash quick. It's a business. And if you're starting a business from scratch, you have to have a 24-month runway before you start to see that income churn. And then inevitably there's a phase of you'll have a lot of transactions, they'll close, and then the pipeline's done. And eventually you'll get to a point even further down your 60 months in, 72 months in, where that pipeline is consistent. So you have to have that staying power in the beginning and that will to keep going through and be willing to, that service model, which you guys have, you mentioned, which is like, hey, I'm going to do more. And then I know eventually it's going to come back to me, but it's not going to happen right now. Before we get into like some of your deals and how you're structuring, right? Because you guys are, what I love about what you guys are doing and speaking with you is you are creative in how you're going about doing what you're doing. But are you guys partners on every deal that you've bought together? Like obviously every deal in the commercial space, you guys are partners on all of it? How is that structure between you two?
Yeah, no, definitely. We're partners on all of it. So the first one we bought, we used an investor for the funds, and it was a close family friend. We said, this is going to be our first deal. You're, not taking a bet on us, but you're trusting us. And so in exchange for that, we're going to get experience and run this deal, and you're going to get all of the cash flow. So that investor is going to get all the cash flow from our first deal. We're not going to get any of it. We're going to get equity in the deal, but no cash flow, because that particular person wanted cash flow. That was like their biggest thing. So we said, let's do it. So we're super thankful for that opportunity. Me and Jesse are in that one. We each own 25%. The other investor owns 50%. So, you don't always, that's like a lesson in itself. You shouldn't go in your first deal expecting that you're going to get 100% or huge chunk or anything like that. You have to build your track record. The second one is different because, like I mentioned before recording, my wife and I bought a single family house, the first house we lived in, with no money down. Lived there for a year, moved out, rented it for 2 years. Then I sold it to my tenant. Was fortunate to make a good amount of money on a residential house. Netted about $100,000, which is wild to say. And then 1031 exchanged into a warehouse. Jesse was helping me with that, so I have the majority of the equity in that one. But since he was helping with the leasing and running the inspections, all that stuff, and we were partners, he got some of that deal too. And then the third one we did, which was the other 4 buildings we partner on with our firm. Our firm has the ability where if we find a deal, we can be partners in it. So we own between me and Jesse, we own 20% of that deal.
I always find it interesting, and I ask that question because Eric and I are partners. And look, I invested in real estate prior to working with him. He invested prior to working with me, but we found synergies in working together that's allowed us to do more, right? Mm-hmm. And I speak to some investors, and they want to do it themselves. They find it's easier. They're the full decision maker. But I like the fact that I have somebody combating me, and sometimes we can go at it on whether it's a deal that we want to do or how operationally we want to look at it, because I feel like the expression iron sharpens iron, like it makes me be better, right? It makes me think out why I want to do something better. How is that dynamic between both of you? Do you guys find that, do you guys have different pathways that you run down on the deal? Is there something that Jesse that you focus on, and something Graham that you focus on? Like, how do you split that work or that the things that you need operationally to find and run deals? Like, how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think for those that know EOS, I'm going to explain this really easy. And for those that don't, you should definitely go read Traction, the book. But I would say that we run things as Graham is more of a visionary, and I'm more the integrator. So, Graham sit down and made sure the list of our due diligence period, for example, was right. And he and I kind of sat down. I was like, okay, I'll take this, you take that. And how that kind of looks is I would go out to the property and make sure that the due diligence stuff is all running right. He's thinking more high level, so because he's got way more experience than I do, of things like attorneys and reading through documents and making sure that seller notes are good. He's building connections with other people and saying, like, for this deal that we were currently under contract on, he's more so talking and leading and with the hard money lender that we're using for the down payment, investor relations, that kind of thing. Like, that's kind of how we're breaking it up. It's not that he's solely visionary, I'm solely integrator. Graham's doing a lot of work too. That's kind of how we've kind of run things. But another level to that too is, I've only been in the business a little bit over a year, and Graham's been in this business over 6 years, right? I kind of want to, and I remind myself often, I was like, I know I'm not like that experienced, but I'm not going to hold that against me. I'm going to try to be as much of a quote unquote Graham story as possible. So like, okay, what does Graham do? I mean, I ask Graham all the time, and I bug him all the time about things and questions and all that stuff. And it's a learning and it's a growing thing, but find yourself, if you're someone like me that was new, find yourself a great mentor and multiple mentors too, right? That you can bounce ideas off of. And then, I don't know, for me, it was just a kind of a gift of like thinking like, oh, like what would, like growing up as a kid, like, oh, well, what would the teacher think or say in this scenario? And that's how I kind of approach school, but I'm trying to apply the same thing to real estate and entrepreneurship.
That's, you hit on it. And when you talk about EOS, which I've read Traction, and we utilize that in our organization. And then when you go through, everybody has their own unique ability, right? Yeah. And so there's certain things, and I don't care how good you are or how good you think you are, there's certain things that you're going to be really good at, and that's your unique ability. But there's certain things that you're just not going to be as strong on, or you're going to do, but you're not going to do it with the same type of energy, zeal, passion for it. And so you might miss it or miss something because it's not really what your focus is. And when you have somebody that compliments you in that way, and it seems like you guys both have kind of identified those roles, that's so key. Like Eric and I took, I don't know if you're familiar with, or if you heard of like a DISC profile, like the DISC. It's just heard of it, yeah. And typically you'll find where you have two people high in the same, in the same category. That's where you get clashes because both people are just jockeying for positioning on it. And when we did it, and I think this part of what makes us work is I'm a high D, high I. He's a high S, he's a high C, high C. And so when we put it together, we're high straight across the board, but we're not kind of conflicting on certain roles. And I think knowing that has allowed us to work really well together, because when he says something, even if in the moment I might not recognize it, and I'll always think back later on and be like, all right, now I understand where that was going, and maybe I might have missed something. And I love hearing from other people who've partnered together, because I think that's, I think one in those instances, when you have the right partnership, and you guys seem to have that right partnership, 1 and 1 is not 2. 1 and 1 can equal 1 + 1 can equal 3. And that's why I think you've because just from where we started, you guys have acquired a lot of property in a short period of time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to hear a little bit, because there's this conception out there, right? And you guys are relatively young guys, right? Not 30.
I just turned 30.
Okay. Well, the best years are still ahead of you, so that's great, right? But there is this misconception out there, or that people start, when they start in real estate, they start in residential, they start speculating on homes. Sometimes they get stuck in that cycle. Sometimes they just want to own duplexes, because, and I think it seems like it's the easiest entryway into the real estate market. And I'm no different. I started doing that. However, you guys have really started right in the commercial pathway, owning, acquiring, buying industrial, and that's not typical. So your current deal that you're working on now, if you want to share some of the dynamics of that, because I think this kind of opens it up for people to see how this is possible.
Yeah. So quick, I guess caveat. I have to look when I bought my first house. I think it was 2021. So I did start in residential. And I think that was kind of like almost like a limiting belief that a lot of people have, is like, you have to start in residential. And I thought the same thing. I was brokering commercial deals, but I didn't know anybody buying commercial deals except for like my clients and stuff. But at that time, I didn't have the thought to think, oh, I could ask these people questions and stuff. I was just worried about making money and surviving, obviously. So I started with residential, bought a house, and then a single family, and then a duplex with Jesse. And then I have 2 more duplexes with another partnership group, and then the house I live in now. So, and then I ended up selling that first one. So anyways, I did residential for like 2 years, and it's good. And you can start that way. You can learn a lot that way. But I think the key to like a big thing about our podcast is we tell people you don't have to start in residential. The whole point, you can start right in commercial, but the key to it is finding, like we talked about before, finding a good mentor, finding somebody who can walk you through it, and finding a good partner. You shouldn't go out and do your first deal by yourself. If you do, it's just not a good idea. I mean, you definitely can. You can go out and do it by yourself, but make sure you got somebody watching over your back, helping you through every aspect of the deal, who's done it before, or you partner with somebody. Ideally, what we tell people to do is go out, find somebody who's doing deals, like somebody like Frank. Go to him, say, what kind of mobile home parks are you guys buying? Where are you buying them? Go find the deals, add value to them. And then in exchange for helping them do that, you can get a little bit of percentage, maybe of the deal. Or maybe in the first one, you don't get any equity. And then you just do that over and over again. And slowly you can build your portfolio that way. That's kind of what we did. But anyways, going to the deal we have under contract now, this is a kind of an experiment for us. We've heard other people do it. I don't know if you know Mike and Bo, those guys, we kind of look up to them big time. They're industrial guys out of Texas. They're kind of buying the same kind of stuff as us. And they're big on social media. And all they talk about is like, we buy, deals with hard money, and then we refinance them out because we get a good enough deal. And it's like the Burr method with industrial. And we're like, well, let's try that. So right now we have a deal under contract. It's 10,000 square feet. It's $450,000. 75% is coming from seller financing. And the 25% we're borrowing as a hard money loan in second position. So we're going to come to the table with less than, I was looking at earlier, less than $10,000 between the two of us. And we're going to buy the deal. There's a tenant in there who's paying way under market rent. We're going to explain to him that, we've got to come up to market because we have to be able to meet our loan requirements, which is the truth. And we obviously would prefer him to stay. We'd love him to stay. If he can't do that, we'll have to release it to somebody else. Once we release it, we've talked to several banks. And once we sign the lease, we're stabilized the property. And then we'll be able to go to a traditional bank, refinance, pull out, the seller note, the second position note and have the property owned by me and Jesse 100% with no money in the deal. And we're buying it at a good enough basis, and we think we can rent it for a high enough price to where we'll be able to do that, pull out money and cash flow.
Well, first of all, kudos to you. That sounds like a phenomenal opportunity that you put in there. And it's unusual to get a hard money lender to take second position. Was that relationship based, or was that, or was it because of how much equity is already in the deal in the first place? Because usually hard money lenders are very specific about being first position, 65% LTV, and ensuring that their security in the asset is untouched. Like, how were you able to do that?
So we talked a lot about, before we started this podcast, about content and how you guys have a whole media set up, which is awesome because you understand the power and the importance of content, putting your brand out there, putting yourself out there. So, we've been doing that a lot I've been doing it for probably about 2 years. Jesse's been doing it this last year. No, by no means have we blown up or anything like that. We're still very small, but I do consistently put out content about my family because I have a wife and 3 beautiful kids, and I'm always with them. That's my the most important thing to me is my family. So I'm always putting up Instagram stories about what I'm doing with my family, hanging out with them, stuff like that. And I met this person at a mastermind. It's kind of, you can't make this stuff up. The first mastermind I ever went to was Commercial Academy, which we're now sponsored by on our podcast, which is awesome. It's a great group. Went down there. This was last year. Went to Orlando. Didn't know anybody there because nobody at the firm I was at could go. And so I went to dinner the first night, sat down next to this person, talked to him about my family, all this stuff. Talked to them about their investing, all this stuff. Told them we were in North Carolina. They were interested in that stuff. Anyways, fast forward to now. We're in that group now. We were looking for a private money lender. Somebody said, "Hey, this person's a private money lender. Let me do an intro." I said, "Great, do the intro." Send an email, and it's the person I was sitting next to at that dinner.
Wow.
So we got on a call with them. They said, I wanted to get into hard money lending. I've never done it before. This will be my first one, but I'll do it with you guys because I like you and I see how you treat your family. I see your values, and I've followed you and I see what you guys are doing and I trust you. It's like, the point of me saying all that is so, like, you can't underestimate the value of just putting yourself out there and being authentic and like really building your brand.
It's so important and key and critical that you said that, because I've said multiple times, real estate is never about bricks and sticks. It is always about people. This is a relationship business. And when you're dealing with people, having that relationship gives you the opportunity to create those opportunities, right? It's when you're getting seller financing, that's relationship financing. That seller is willing to finance you based on a relationship that you've built with them over time. And that's the beautiful thing about this business, because yes, there's a transaction involved. Yes, there's a price for that building. But if you're finding the opportunity, you can create that relationship. You can create structures that aren't, say, quote unquote, standard, right? And that's kind of allowed you to do that. How does the seller financing play in this? Like, how did you structure that? Is it short term, long term? Like, how did you go about approaching that to the owner of the property?
Yeah. So I cold called this owner and actually on a different property. He has several properties, is a developer in the area, has developed essentially half of the town, which seems it's just crazy. But anyways, he told me that he wasn't a seller. He was not going to do seller financing. And I was like, that's fine. We couldn't even get the deal done. So we actually had lunch with him, just talked to him, show who we are. And then just kind of kept following up with him. Lost out on another deal that he had. Fast forward, and I just called him straight up and was like, "Hey, what about this building on this street?" And he's like, actually, it's in a trust, but my kids don't want the real estate; they just want the money. So I'd actually would consider selling it. And so we put a couple offers in front of him, and he just changed his mind about the seller financing and said that he would do it for us. So what we did was we structured, he wasn't going to go into anything but first position. He wanted a close. I mean, we're doing like 7% interest rate. So, and then we're going to do a 3-year balloon because he didn't want to carry it that long, and we didn't really either because we were planning on refinancing it. So we did a 3-year balloon, 25-year AM, I believe, right, Graham?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And he agreed to it and did it. So I mean,
Yeah.
that whole period though, that took like what, 9 months probably, Graham, at least.
Yeah, it was a good while. And one thing you didn't mention too that I think it's important to point out is like, yeah, we called this guy several times, but more importantly, we took this approach, and I've taken this approach with sellers before. This guy's like in his 70s, mid 70s probably. He's pretty old, but he's an absolute killer. He's still out there working and stuff, not because he has to, because he loves it. And so we just took the approach of, hey, can we meet you? Can we sit down with you at lunch and just learn about how you built your portfolio? How did you do all this business? How did you buy all this real estate? Because this guy's probably worth, I don't know, like a lot of money. He's worth a lot of money, and you would never expect it. And so, that was a lunch, and then it was us going out to one of his projects that he was doing. We toured his development project. It was like an old mill that he redid, put apartments in there, commercial buildings, got a restaurant, and he was, very proud of this. He saw that we were like legitimately, and it wasn't like we were doing this for like, oh, we're going to do all this so we can buy his deal. It's like, no, we want to learn from this guy.
Sure.
But that relationship developed, and because that relationship developed, he saw we were young and hungry and wanted to buy these things. And so he's like, yeah, I'll give you guys a shot at buying this deal, and I'll do some seller financing.
And that works for him, and it works because he still gets cash flow. You got from there, you negotiated great terms, below market terms currently for an industrial deal. So that's, bona fortuna for you guys. But seller financing is such a key component to making deals work, but it is relationship driven. We had a deal recently. It was an adjoining property to us. It was right next door. It was 271 units. We were the natural buyers for this property. The challenge was getting the financing to make the deal work. When we sat there and were negotiating with the seller on this, we came in, I would take the deal. I want 4%, 5-year finance, 5-year term, 25-year AM to do this, to make this deal work. He didn't want to be below, where inflation was at that time, right? So inflation was a little over that, and he felt he was losing money, and he wanted to be at 7%. So how did we bridge this gap? But this is where having the conversation with people works. What we ended up doing was blending this. We did because the property needed improvements, right? And we didn't want to stress the asset. We ended up with a 3.5% current pay, but we would accrue the back end, the 300 basis points for the term of the mortgage, right? So for us, if we execute on our business plan, which we're already in the process of doing that, it's a 271 unit deal. You're talking a few dollars more when we go to refinance. But while we need the cash flow, we have the cash flow that we can, that's not stressing the asset. He's still getting he's still secure in first position. He's still secure getting, he knows he's getting his money. He's just deferring the payment until we refinance and stabilize the community from there. But that only happens because we developed, to your point, I was working on a deal with him for 1.5 years, right? And by that time, he saw what we were doing at the neighboring property. He saw the work we were doing. We had a track record where we could show that, hey, we've worked with sellers in the past. We've never defaulted on a seller mortgage. I've had some sellers end up coming back to work with us to manage the same parks that they've sold from us. And, I can have those references and those points where that's key. And I think that you developing that now and being genuine in your approach, that's only going to mean more success for you going forward in the future on that. So that's a truly exciting deal. Do you guys solely focus in the industrial space? You're looking at warehouse. Do you look at other commercial as well?
Yeah, we definitely tend to be like opportunistic where like we can get a little distracted. But what we learned in the last year is that all the buildings we just mentioned, all 6 of them plus the 7th we're under contract on, are literally within a mile radius of each other. Okay. And so we found that like we just built a lot of traction in that area. and we found that we could buy these for a certain dollar a foot, which is around $40 to $45 a foot. We can rent them for $6 a foot. So the math works. And we're like, why don't we just double down on this for the beginning to build like a base portfolio of maybe 10 buildings or something like that. If we can build 10 buildings that spits off whatever it is cash flow a month for each of us, then we can start to look at other opportunities. We can start to look at, we like retail. So the firm we work with buys industrial and retail. It's their core focus, but their main focus is small bay flex. So we just found kind of a niche in this 20,000 square foot building, industrial single tenant space. And we like it.
So that's what you're focused on. And you're in the triangle, right? The research triangle in North Carolina.
So I live in Durham. Jesse lives in Raleigh. They're completely different places. So don't get it twisted. I'm just kidding. People lump them together, but they're very different. Durham's there. And then you got about an hour away is the Triad. And that's like Greensboro, Winston-Salem, and High Point. Mm-hmm. So the Triad is like I don't know if you guys outside of North Carolina see in the news, but like there's all these big jet manufacturers coming. Toyota's building a big battery plant and it's booming. Mm-hmm. And it's a lesser known triangle. So like you probably heard of Raleigh, Durham and stuff, but Greensboro and Winston are really starting to blow up. And so we just, we've been looking in that market and it's a lot easier. Like the triangle is a very hard market. And the chance you're going to find a deal that works the way that it works in the Triad is slim. It's possible for sure, but there are a lot more deals in the Triad. Now there's obviously, caveats to that where the stuff in the triangle, since it's harder to get, there's a higher demand. So you're probably going to lease it faster. If you need to sell it, you could probably sell it faster. It's probably going to appreciate a lot more versus in the Triad. You might not lease it as fast. If you sell it, it might not sell as fast. And it's probably not going to appreciate as much. Hopefully it will, but it probably not as much as the triangle. So, we're after cash flow right now. It's our main goal. So it works well for us, but eventually we probably will pivot.
Okay. So right now the focus is industrial, mid-industrial size buildings in that region. And you want to kind of dominate that space, that mid-market space, which there's very few players like on the large scale. I mean, you're competing against real big boys, but in that space, the market kind of opens up, right? It becomes not that there's not competition, but there's less players out there. It gives you a real, there's riches and niches, right? Like, so you could get a specialty in there and you could really dominate that and really create some both cash flow and appreciation, grow wealth that way.
Yeah, for sure. There's like, I think we have, like you talked about earlier, we both read the book 10X is easier than 2X, and you talked about your unique ability, and we've talked about kind of what our unique ability is finding really good deals, because we're going there once a week and we're driving around looking at buildings. And because we did those 6 buildings, we were talking to tenants. We know what the lease rate is. We're brokers, so we have access to CoStar. We see what comes up on the market. And in my opinion, there's just not, like you said, there's not really another buyer who's doing that. Not like we're special or anything. We just have a lot of different unique aspects that help us have an advantage. Like we get called by people, hey, we'd like to invest in this market, but they're in New York or California or somewhere and they want to buy these properties, but they're not boots on the ground in the weeds of all this stuff. And we are. So like we're kind of like we just get like the first chance at looking at the stuff basically. And we're also, the other big thing is we cold call a lot. We haven't been in the last month or so because we focus on this deal, but we're prospecting all the time.
People discount making that call, and I think a lot of people hate making calls. Right? That's the whole thing. They just don't like the rejection. But at the end of the day, it's just building a relationship. It's just, hey Jesse, I'm Frank. I hope everything's going okay. How's the family? Is there anything I can help you with? Are you working on anything that I can help you with right now? And if you make it just that simple,
yeah,
you can create a lot of great relationships that might not create anything now, but down the road, it could be hugely beneficial for you. Hugely.
Yeah. And just so you know, all 7 buildings came from a cold call.
Good for you. I love hearing that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to just pivot the conversation quickly, because being a broker, and you guys are young, right? So you guys have a ton of energy to do a lot of things right now, but there are points where you hit a wall, right? I don't care if you're a real estate investor, you're building your business. There are those like points where you're just like, all right, did I hit a plateau? What do you guys do to like recharge, recalibrate, get yourself, get your head right so you maintain that focus? And I'll ask Jesse just to get an idea of what you do to keep that focus moving forward.
Well, I'm a big sports guy, so it kind of varies, but I've been golfing a lot lately. That's been kind of my sport. And just, I love being outdoors. Graham loves being outdoors. We love traveling. So, we just did a podcast in Florida with Todd Napola. And I think Graham had texted me on like Monday or something like that. He's like, hey, do you want to go to Florida this week? It's like, absolutely. And like, I'm in. Like, that's how I love traveling. I love getting outdoors and playing sports.
Yeah. Yeah, it was cool. We, I think I'm huge in setting goals, and I think everybody should be, because my first year in brokerage, I had no goals. I was just floating, going through the motions. Second year, same thing. Third year, I was like, oh, like that's how naive I was. Like, oh, I should probably have some goals here. I set a goal, and then I was able to hit it. And I think it's because I had a target that I was shooting at that I actually hit it. And with the podcast, we sat down in the beginning of the year and we're like, man, it'd be really cool to go do travel and do some podcasts, going to see some of these, big name guests and stuff. That'd be amazing. We've done, I set a goal to do 2. We've already done our 2. I didn't think it was going to happen that quickly, but we did. We went and visited Brian Lubin, who's got like his podcast gets over 1 million streams a year. We flew to Texas to see him. And then we went and visited Todd Napola, and he's got a huge Instagram and TikTok presence. So it was just from setting goals, which was pretty cool. But like Jesse said, I feel like we get caught up in, and like we can get caught up thinking like, we'll have a conversation about, man, we got to get another deal and all this stuff. And I'll have to catch Jesse and myself too and be like, dude, not to toot our horn, but look at what we did over the last year. We're not failing, just because we're not having a win right now, right this second, this day, doesn't mean that we didn't do a lot of stuff over the last year, and we have a lot of traction. We have a lot of momentum. So we try to remind ourselves of that. I'm reading the book, The Gap and the Gain, which is like, that's what it's all about. It's like looking at the gain and not the gap. And I feel like we catch ourselves, and any entrepreneur in general is in the gap like most of the time, and they have to catch themselves. And for people who don't know what that is, basically it's just saying like, it's pretty much just like thinking negatively about your situation versus thinking positively about your situation. If you set a goal for $100,000 a year and you make it to 60, but that was your first year in business, instead of saying, man, I missed out on 40 grand, think, oh, I made $60,000 this year, and I made so much progress, and I learned so much.
It's funny you say that, because I feel like you remind yourself, and you got to remind people that you're with, like, there was a point in time in your life where you prayed and you hoped that you would have these challenges that you're having now, right? Like there was a time where you're like, wow, I wish I could, if I was going to be at that point, but that comes with stuff, right? And that's going to come with different sets of challenges, and that's okay, right? Because it's not supposed to be a smooth ride. It's supposed to be an exciting journey, and you're supposed to learn from it and get better and look for ways to improve, and look for ways to grow. And I mean, you're hitting a lot of the great points there. So where do you guys see yourselves in the next 3 years? Like, what's the goal for Graham and Jesse? Where are you guys going from here?
We've kind of sat down and done our VTO. I personally think that it's at least 10 grand cash flow a month per person. So, because we, like Graham mentioned, we're focused on cash flow. I think that looks like taking down probably 5 to 10 more buildings, just depending on the cash flow and the deal flow. But I think that's what things look like from that perspective. For me, on the glove side, I'm just trying to get in as many places as possible. I'm still in that growth phase right now, and probably building out a team. We'd like to hire a personal assistant. We'd like to hire out a team, like similar to what you had mentioned before the podcast got started, like with a media agency. We'd love to do things like that.
Yeah, I would say one of our core values that we haven't finalized everything yet, but one of the core values we want is just having things very simple. So like that means, it sounds, good, too good to be true to say all this, but this is what we're shooting for. Not like as few partners as possible. The partners we have are ones we enjoy being around, hanging out with, not just somebody who's been giving us money. It's like people we enjoy being with and working with. as few buildings as possible with as much cash flow as possible. I mean, everybody wants that, but we're not necessarily out there trying to build a portfolio of $300 million of real estate, and we have 1,000 investors and we're sending out investor reports. And, that's not really what we're after. We're after like, hey, if we could build a base of 15, 20 buildings and it's giving us $10,000 of cash flow, that's going to give us the ability to have the option to not work. Neither of us are lazy. Neither of us are going to stop working, but we don't want that. Hey, I got to get up and on that brokerage grind of, I got to do another deal and I have to get on the phone. I have to do this. I have to do that. And that thought in the back of my head of, okay, is money coming in this month? Am I going to be able to feed my family this month? Not saying it's been that way, but like it can be very cyclical. So we want that steady base so we can go out and travel. And for me, spend time with my family, especially while they're young, because my kids I have 3 kids under 4 years old. So I want to spend as much time with them as possible. So really just, I think to answer the question, in 3 years, we want to do exactly what we're doing now, but just be further ahead. So like have more buildings, hopefully have a larger audience and continue to make content. We love making content and hopefully helping people who either have the belief that they can't get into commercial real estate or, they're switching from residential to commercial. That's like the core people hopefully can see what we're doing and think, oh, I can do that too. Cause there's nothing special about either of us.
Well, there is something special about both of you guys, which is the way you did get started and the way that you have built this over time. So that is special, right? Because not everybody does it. And you took the initiative to make those moves and looking at creating that financial freedom now, the key point of financial freedom isn't just that, hey, I can travel or I can do what I want. The key point is that you find that you make a lot better decisions because you're not making decisions out of need of right now or want of right now. You're making decisions based on goals and priorities and values. And that is the key. And I'll never forget, I worked in sales and I was in finance, and I had somebody tell me very early on, said, Frank, make every decision like you had $500,000 in the bank account, in your bank account. And that was when $500,000 was a lot of money right back then. Not that I want to date myself, but he said, make every decision like you have $500,000 in the bank account. And when he said, why? He said, well, if you do that, then you're going to make a lot better decisions. Because to his point is you're not going to make a decision based on the, need of the moment. So in picking the right partners, right, and investors in that, and you said something really key. I mean, I like working with people who I like, right? Because the people who I work with, I end up being that what I'm doing is so much a big part of my life, right? That if I'm taking you in to be part of what I do. And I want to share that story and share that journey. And we're going to be part of the wins and the losses, the challenges and the opportunities. And I want to make sure I'm taking that ride with somebody who I want to take that ride with, not just because somebody has some money and they want to put it to work and they want to say, hey, take my money and go to work, because we've turned away people that we just, or entities that we just like, this isn't the right fit for us. And if it doesn't fit, then we don't want to do that. And I think that's a very important part. And you guys are, without a doubt, I mean, you're structuring yourselves the right way. And your podcast is great. I mean, not only been part of it, but just you've got a lot of content out there. You've had a lot of really impactful conversations in there. And I think that's great for people to get. So if they want to hear more about Graham and Jesse, like where would somebody reach you? Where would they find you? Yeah.
So you can follow me on Instagram, Graham _ Storey, STOREY, or YouTube, same handle. Our podcast is Commercial Real Estate Blueprint Podcast. You can look it up on anywhere that's streaming. You can also look. My YouTube channel has it hosted too. And then Jesse, I don't know your Instagram handle off the top of my head.
It's the Jesse Durham on everything. I'm getting started on YouTube here in a couple of weeks. It'll July 1st. I'm not sure when this will go live, but you can DM me, follow me on Instagram at the Jesse Durham. And then my glove company is Safety Tough. So Safety TUFF. You can go in there and check us out.
Listen, guys, I appreciate you being on. This has been another episode of the MHP Exchange podcast, brought to you by the MHPExchange.com. If you found value in this episode, if you liked it, on whatever device you're listening to, whether it's iTunes, Spotify, or something else, rate the episode, send us a comment. We'd love to hear more from you guys out there. Until next time, everybody, happy investing.